are these people?
So we did reported on Randi Weingarten, I believe, back in the summer in terms of Chris Smalls, because during their AFT, American Federation of Teachers conference in Boston, Chris Smalls spoke at that event, and then a few other folks that we know of in politics were also featured at the event as well. So Miss Randi Weingarten actually went to Ukraine, and reported by Clara Weiss from World Socialist website. Randi Weingarten covers up the role of Ukrainian fascism in the Holocaust. What is that? So I probably have to watch my language because I'm sure there's going to be some words in here that might get us dinged.
I think we'll be okay. It's imagery, I think, is the big problem.
Right. But all the same, I'm going to attempt to censor myself just in case anyway.
Sure.
So, but anyway, according to the article, nothing reveals the pro-capitalist and pro-imperialist character of the AFL-CIO as starkly as the deliberate cover-up of the historical crimes of Ukrainian fascism by Randi Weingarten on a pro-war tour to Ukraine this week. Well, actually, it was last week. In tweeting on her trip to Ukraine, Randi Weingarten claimed she was there on behalf of the 1.7 million teachers who are members of the American Federation of Teachers. This is a shameless lie. She toured Ukraine not as a representative of teachers, but as a loyal servant of the American state apparatus, of the military, and of the war profiteers who have raked in record profits from the multi-billion-dollar arms deliveries to Ukraine army and fascist paramilitaries. None of her discussions have anything to do with the interests of workers in Ukraine, let alone the United States. During her trip, Weingarten met with US-backed trade union officials who are now called upon to impose massive attacks on the Ukrainian working class by the Zelensky government. On Friday, she's speaking with representatives of the Polish teachers' unions in Warsaw, which are scrambling to contain growing working class anger amidst skyrocketing inflation. Her war tour in Ukraine culminated with a trip to Lviv, where Weingarten had the audacity to refer to the fascist massacre in the city to justify her support for the US-NATO war against Russia. On Thursday, she tweeted, "Spent time today walking through the Jewish quarter of Lviv and the memorial at the Jewish ghetto. 140,000 Jews were killed from 1941 to 1943. That equated to 98% of Jewish population, which was 30% of Lviv's then population." So here's the tweet that she tweeted out last week.
Ooh.
Yes. So to continue, you zoom out. What Weingarten failed to mention is that the fascist organization of Ukrainian nationalists under Stepan Bandera played a critical role in the extermination of the Jewish population of Lviv. This omission was not an accident. The day before, Weingarten met with Lviv's mayor, Andriy Sadoshi. I said that wrong, but Weingarten tweeted that 3 words guide him: unbroken, resilient, and survival. Sadovi is, in fact, an outspoken admirer of the fascist Bandera. So here's that other tweet. In 2011, Sadovi praised Bandera and his fascist ally, Roman Shukevich, as our heroes who had defended our soil and should be honored by children and youth. On February 26, he urged residents to defend the city in what he called Bandera smoothies, to term for Molotov cocktails.
Because that's a brush. Okay, yes. Yep. Gotcha.
Okay. Right. Okay. Under Sadovi's administration, large parts of Lviv had become transformed into something of a fascist theme park. The city is littered with monuments to Ukrainian fascists and collaborators, and numerous streets and buildings were named after them. In 2012, the Simon Westfall Center criticized Sadovi directly for attempting to cover up very strong manifestations of anti-Semitism in Lviv, and denouncing the city's administration for continuing to countenance anti-Semitism, including awarding a prize dedicated to Bandera.
Mm-hmm.
According to historian Per Andres Ruling,
Rudling.
Rudling, sorry, Krivka, I guess that's how you say
Yep.
it.
Beefka.
Perhaps the most popular local restaurant is themed after the armed wing of the OUNB, the UBA, Ukrainian Insurgents Army. Its motto is "The fight continues," and it claims to attract 1 million visitors per year. On the menu, they offer dishes such as cold boiled pork, hande hoik, and
Unhosh.
combat serenade.
Yep.
Their guests are seated in dining rooms decorated with larger-than-life portraits on bandera, while the toilets are plastered with Russian and Jewish anecdotes. This is just one restaurant in a series of fascist pop restaurants and pubs that are run by one of the city's most successful entrepreneurs. The National Liev Ivan Franko University, where Weingarten met with officials from the main Ukrainian teachers union, is, in the words of Rudling, explicitly committed to ethnizing its student body and to producing a nationally conscious elite. It is one of the most important hubs of Ukrainian academia, where the lines of what is deemed legitimate scholarship and ultra-nationalist propaganda are systematically blurred. Weingarten's promotion of these far-right politicians and institutions and her deliberate silence about the crimes of the Ukrainian fascists against the Jewish population of Liev and Ukraine have the most sinister implications. Because of its geostrategic and economic significance, German imperialism occupied and sought to subjugate Ukraine in both world wars, but it never did so without substantial collaboration from the nationalist bourgeoisie and local far-right forces. In World War II, this collaboration assumed monstrous proportions. The Ukrainian fascists of the OUN, which arose out of a violent nationalist reaction against the socialist October Revolution of 1917, became a central pillar of the war against the Soviet Union and especially the Holocaust. They were imbued with racist, fascist ideology in which anti-Jewish hatred was fused with the most violent anti-communism. Although Liev was then a multi-ethnic city of Poles, Jews, and Ukrainians, it emerged as a heartland of the Ukrainian far right. It was here on June 30th, 1941 at 8 p.m. that Yaroslav Sketsko from the OUNB proclaimed an independent Ukrainian state under the leadership of Stepan Bandera and pledged Ukrainians' cooperation with the National Socialist Great Germany, which under the leadership of Hitler is creating a new order in Europe and the world and is helping the Ukrainian nation liberate itself from Muscovite occupation. All over the city, the and OUNB put up yellow and blue, as well as, not going to say that, flags, along with posters with slogans such as "Long live Stepan Bandera, long live Adolf Hitler." As the OUNB was proclaiming its independent Ukrainian state, the most horrific, I guess that meant program, in Western Ukraine under Nazi occupation was on the way. Starting in the early morning of July 1st, 1941, members of the Ukrainian militia that had been set up by the OUNB began dragging Jews from their homes to prison yards, where they were forced to engage in rituals that were supposedly showed their responsibility for crimes by the Soviet Secret Service NKVD. Then they were brutally beaten to death. Jewish women were kicked, beaten, stripped naked, and raped. Pregnant women were kicked and hit in the stomach. The perpetrators of the program were above all Ukrainian nationalists, but also German occupation forces, as well as elements from the local Ukraine and, to a lesser extent, the Polish population. Historian Grzegorz Rosolinski-Lieb, who wrote the authoritative biography of Stepan Bandera, stressed that the program was a well-organized action in which the Ukrainian militia established by the OUNB collaborated closely with German formations. And then there's a quote there. The program resulted, pogrom, okay. The program resulted in an estimated 7,000 to 8,000 deaths. Less than 2 months later, from July 25th to 28th, the Ukrainian nationalists staged the next pogrom in Liev, killing another estimated 1,500 people. Historians put the overall number of those who murdered in anti-Jewish pogroms spearheaded by the OUB in the first months after the invasion in West Ukraine at 39,000. Horrific as these numbers are, they form but a relatively small part of the crimes of the Ukrainian fascist forces during World War II. Members of the OUMB were integrated en masse into the policy into the police under the German occupation authorities, which played a central role in the Holocaust in Ukraine. At least 1.6 million Ukrainian Jews were killed in this genocide. The crimes of Ukrainian fascism were not limited to the Jewish population. In 1943 to 1944, the OUMB and the UPA engaged in genocidal massacres of the Polish population that lived for centuries of what is now Ukrainian territory. Eastern Galicia, where Liev is located, along with Volhynia, again became the center of the OUN-UPA massacres. Between 70,000 and 100,000 Polish men, women, and children were murdered by the OUN-UPA, often with the same torturous methods that the Ukrainian fascists had learned from the and early deployed against their Jewish victims. Teachers might wonder why Weingarten is spending so much effort promoting a war that Biden himself has said could lead to Armageddon, under conditions in which teachers confront an ongoing pandemic and escalating austerity that is aimed at destroying the institution of public education. In reality, teachers in the US are the victims of the same pro-capitalist and war policies that Weingarten and the AFL-CIO are imposing on workers in Eastern Europe. Weingarten postures as a defender of Ukrainian freedom, while she and the AFT have played an indispensable role in enforcing the herd immunity response of the ruling class to the COVID-19 pandemic by pushing for the unsafe reopening of schools on behalf of Wall Street and against the opposition of teachers and parents. As a result of these murderous policies, more than 1 million Americans have died, among them at least 8,000 teachers and 2,000 children. To the American ruling class, the buildup of fascist forces not only in Ukraine, but also at home, is a necessary component of the drive of US imperialism to subject first Russia, then China, and eventually the entire globe to its unrestrained domination, and to prepare for violent confrontation with the working class. Within this strategy of war at both home and abroad, the union bureaucracies played a critical role of suppressing the class struggle and subordinating the working class to the state machinery and the interests of the ruling class. Randi Weingarten's visit to Liev and her cover-up of the crimes of Ukrainian fascism makes two things abundantly clear. First, a movement to put an end to the war must involve a rebellion by workers in the US and across the world against these reactionary apparatuses, and the establishment of an international network of rank-and-file committees to organize workers' struggles in an internationally unified and coordinated manner. Second, a socialist anti-war movement in the working class must be prepared by and rooted in the defense of historical truth and the assimilation of all the key political lessons of the great unsolved issues of the 20th century. Thoughts, Reef? That was a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's stuff a lot of, like individually people might know those things. It's the fact that like Weingarten is going, which like, why is the AFT, which we've covered this before previously, right?
Yeah.
On, like what, and the AFT also focused on COVID stuff too, right? And I think green energy as well. Are you out? Okay. Bye, kitty. But like, and what did he even give an excuse of why he was over there? Like, have people asked him?
Gee.
Okay.
Well, the idea was, she was going in solidarity, quote unquote.
Gotcha.
Which is kind of bull considering, like, and again, this is the idea of like, and I see a lot of people have said this online. It's like, yeah, we should offer aid to Ukraine, all this. Fine. And I'm not going to get into that argument now, but if you're going to do that, like, take care of your own house, take care of the issues at home. Right now, teachers are not getting paid. Teachers are overworked, there are issues with COVID still in schools that have not been taken care of. And as a leader, I would imagine that the first priority should be towards the teachers here. You
Yeah.
know, I don't, whether or not you can argue like whether or not she goes to Ukraine or not, but the idea that she's going in solidarity with and meeting with unions there, and they're having similar issues over the idea of staying at home and trying to take care of the issues that she like kind of fucked up, you know, in terms of COVID. And then I mean, I'm not a fan of teachers unions I mean, I'm a part of one, but I'm not a fan of them because I feel like in many cases, you know, they're like they don't really have any power really, you know, like ones in local districts. Like obviously the AAT is the biggest one and obviously has the biggest amount of power. She should be doing more to kind of combat the issues here. So
Yeah.
the idea that she's going over there to try and work with the working class in Ukraine is just kind of like, and that was the comments I was seeing online in regards to this. It's just kind of like you're going over there to help Ukrainian people, but you're not helping the people here.
Right.
And then like just the historical significance of where she went, you know, which many people actually did not know of this until Indy sent me this article on Monday. You know, the idea like where she went has a lot of far right undertones to it. It's just kind of tone deaf, you know? Um, so yeah, I think it's just her way of kind of being complicit to what our government is wanting to do in Ukraine in a sense of, you know, our way of beating Russia is to basically beat up Ukraine, you know, essentially. And she's kind of complicit in that. So that's just my take on it.
Yep. I feel you. Yeah, it's weird. Like, I mean, it's standard politician. Me and Nitty talk about labor frequently, right?
Mm-hmm.
In a way that like they're very similar to politicians and you know politics in general, right? Like, you know, in the way that union leaders work and how unions operate. There's lots of like nuanced problems, you know, and a lot of times they choose instead of dealing with problems because there's a lot to deal with, like they choose to go after, you know, like identity politics stuff or like this to me is equally as bad as like right wingers during the Bush administration with the war on terror, you know, like imagine if your teachers union talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
Or like that they went over there to do, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. I think it's kind of fitting, like with the next segment that I report on, in talking about, you know, ideology or whatever. Like, I think it's very fitting in terms of like what what you say your principles are versus what your actions are. And
Yeah.
so I think even in the article, you know, like, and it does, I don't follow Randi Weingarten like that, but it's like, even if she went, and if you disagree on that, what are the calls for anti-war? You know, like what are the calls for her on behalf of teachers to kind of say to teachers over there, look, we want this war to end, you know, or at least have a ceasefire in terms of, you know, helping the US, Ukraine, and Russia come to some sort of deal or agreement, you know. It didn't sound like that happened, you know. So that just kind of puts into question like why she was there, you know. She wasn't necessarily, as far as you know, like I assume, wasn't calling for anti-war. So you know, so I just feel she's just kind of being complicit in prolonging and making worse, you know, this war issue and, you know, probably exacerbating it, you know,
Yeah.
in a lot of ways just by being there. So again, like I said, whatever you feel about Ukraine, fine, but it's like we have issues here that you haven't necessarily addressed, you know, and as our top union leader, essentially in the country for teachers, she has a position where she should be speaking out on this more. Like I get emails from her all the time from work, but like I don't read them because I don't buy what she talks about. You know, she
Yeah.
talks about how, you know, teachers are like, you know, like we're necessary and like, you know, we're trying doing good work and all that kind of stuff. I don't feel that kind of care from her. Well, yeah, I mean, long story short, she's part of the establishment. So, you know, so I don't expect her to really reach out on behalf of us. That's where, as the working class and, you know, being in solidarity, you know, not just among people here, but in Ukraine too, because the working class in Ukraine are being, and I don't think really anyone's talking about them either. You know, this war is affecting them,
Yeah.
you know, and their livelihood. And mainstream media is not talking about, you know, what's happening to working class people there. This is where we need to work in solidarity, especially since, you know, I'm sure many Ukrainians are anti-war too. So where's the calls for that from them that we don't hear about? So,
Well,
you know,
meanwhile,